Hi boys, this is our lesson now moving on to chapter 10 with the much anticipated circles. To start, I'm going to focus on the vocabulary in chapter 10 section 1, and I did split this section up into 3 different videos and lessons because there's a lot of information. So in this video, I'm going to basically focus on just the vocabulary and what the lines or segments look like in relationships to different diagrams that you will have to mark up and label correctly. So to start with actually defining what a circle is, it's all of the points on a single plane, so think of a coordinate plane, that are the same distance away from the center of the circle. So this black circle here is what we'd be talking about, and all of these points on this black circle are equidistant from this black center point. I also put how to name a circle properly, and you draw a circle with like a darkened dot in the middle, and whatever that center point would be. So if I had an F next to this center point, you just put that label next to the circle with the dot in the middle that you drew. Another part of a circle that we're going to focus on is a chord. Now, a chord is specifically a segment, so I would probably underline or highlight that word in your definition if you printed out these notes or are writing them down. And it's the endpoints are on a circle. So here's this purple chord. Notice it's a segment, so it's not continuing through on either side of the circle. And one endpoint is on this upper side of the circle, and the second endpoint is more towards the bottom. A diameter is very similar to a chord because it is referred to as a chord, but it's more specific in the sense of it has to contain the center of the circle. So in red, we have the diameter, and it is a chord that stops with both endpoints on one side, on each side of the circle, and it passes through the center point. Now, you have used diameter before when you were talking about area or circumference in other classes. So we're going to be using diameter and radius as well in our different definitions. Now, a radius is half the diameter, but in more specific cases to our definitions, the radius would be a segment again, so that's important to remember, that endpoints are at the center of the circle and any other point on the circle. So if I was just using half this diameter, I would use this black center point and only half of its length, and here would be the second endpoint. A radius is not a chord because there's only one endpoint on the circle itself. A secant is a line, so I would underline or highlight that intersects two different points on the circle. So in green, we have our line that's referred to as the secant, and notice it intersects the circle one time here and one time here on the right. But it is a line, so it travels through the circle, which that is the big difference between a secant and a chord. The last line that we're going to focus on is a tangent. And again, it's a line, and it has to be on the same plane of the circle, so in the same coordinate that you would have been using. And it only intersects one point on the circle. So this blue line, line P, I guess PT we can call it, it passes through one point on the outside of the circle here, and that point of tangency is point T because that's where it crosses through the circle one time. All of these different lines can be drawn at different spots on the circle. These are just a few examples so you have an understanding of how to do your homework. Now down below, hold on, let me delete out some of these answers, is what your homework will look like. It will have you label different parts of the segments or lines within a circle. So if we're going to start with letter A, I see that they are referring to AD, and it is a segment. Remember the proper notations that we had used earlier in the year when we're talking about lines and segments. That's going to be very important when you write out your final answers. So if I'm looking at segment AD, A to D, I notice that I'm probably going to be thinking about either a chord or a diameter. Now for this, I can put diameter, and since it says to be specific, I wouldn't mind you putting in parentheses that it's a chord as well, but the most specific name is diameter, and that's what I'm going to be looking for. In GE, for letter B, that's also a segment because of the notation that's given to us. So if we find G through E, we can still refer to it as a tangent because it's only passing through one sole point on our circle. So points of tangency, when we're referring to this, a tangent segment still works because it's passing through one point. So I would put that point, that segment GE is considered a tangent because it only passes through the circle once. And if we look up here, it intersects the circle at only one point. If we're looking at line AE, where is that? So A to E. So if this line was to continue onwards in both directions, we see that it passes through the circle once and twice. So that would be referred to as a secant. If we identify CA, CA is a line, so that means it's going to be drawn this way as well as continue onwards in this direction. So I'd want to jump and say radius, but that probably isn't the best name because this line will continue in both directions and it will pass through the circle once at point A. And if I draw the line in the other direction, it will also pass through the circle again at point D. So this again would be a secant. Now, if it was just a segment above CA, then I would say that it is a radius. So maybe I'll add that in here to our examples. Hold on, let's add another letter. H. Let's insert another example. Give me a minute. Okay, we'll get back to that one. If we look at letter E, we see line KG, which is also for us going to be a secant. Wow, I put a lot of these on here. If we look at letter, oh, I skipped F. Wow, I'm good at the alphabet here. If I look at letter F, and that's segment HB, notice it has one endpoint on two different spots of the circle, so that would be a chord. If we look at G, which is the last one that I added in, I put segment CA. That is what a radius would look like. So I hope this was helpful with your homework when it comes to labeling different parts of the circle. What I did for your homework is I would say name two radii. So for example, in your homework, if it said name two radii, you would put CA, and you could also put CD because they're both different parts of the circle. Now again, you could have different points that are marked up that can have you draw from the center. So I could say CF, that works, CH, CB, an infinite amount, but this is what your homework will be more so like. So you'll have more freedom to pick different answers. So good luck, and I hope this video helped.